You know, when you picture a Roman coin, you're probably thinking about gold and silver, right? Maybe an ancient marketplace, trade, all that stuff. But what if I told you that for the Romans, this was never really just about money? See, the story of Roman currency is actually the story of how a government turned a simple piece of metal into one of the most powerful tools of empire the world had ever seen. Welcome to History and Society, where we break down how power and belief systems shaped human history. So, to really get what Rome did here, you have to put yourself in their shoes. The Republic was expanding at a mind-boggling rate, swallowing up new lands, new people, new resources. How on earth do you pay millions of soldiers scattered across a continent? How do you keep them supplied? And maybe the biggest question of all, how do you make all these different people feel like they're part of one empire, feel Roman? And this right here, this shows the huge leap they took. On the left, you've got this early stuff, the as rudes, which is basically just a lump of bronze. Its value was literally just how much it weighed. So every time you wanted to buy something, you had to haul out a set of scales. But then look to the right at the denarius. This is where Rome did something totally revolutionary. The state basically came along and said, this coin is worth this much because we say so. All of a sudden, the value wasn't just in the metal anymore. It was in the government's promise. You went from weighing to counting. Now, this wasn't some happy accident. Rome built this incredibly complex and sophisticated machine to create and manage its new state-backed money. It was a whole system built for one purpose: total control. And here's what's so important to understand. Rome controlled every single part of this process. The government set up its own mints. As it conquered new territories like Spain and Britain, it immediately seized their gold and silver mines, giving itself a total monopoly on the raw materials. Then, every coin was made to an exact weight and purity, so you knew a denarius from Gaul was the same as one from Egypt. But that last part, that was the real masterstroke. Think about it. By stamping the emperor's face and his official titles on every single coin, his authority was literally in the palm of your hand. It didn't matter if you were in a tavern in Britain or a market in Syria. A farmer in Egypt paying his taxes was holding a tiny metal reminder of who was in charge, sent straight from Rome. It was brilliant, handheld propaganda. Okay, so how did all this actually work day to day? Well, with this financial machine humming along, Rome could now easily fund the very things that made it an empire in the first place: its massive army, its incredible infrastructure, and its sprawling government. This little coin became the lifeblood of the whole imperial project. Just take the Roman military, for example. You've got an army with hundreds of thousands of professional soldiers. They need to be paid, on time, all the time. Under the first Emperor Augustus, a legionary made around 900 sesterces a year. Getting that steady paycheck in official Roman coins was absolutely key to ensuring the loyalty of the men holding the empire together. And it created this amazing economic loop. Here's how that engine worked. Step 1. The state minted the coins using silver from its mines. Step 2. It uses those shiny new coins to pay its soldiers and government workers. Step 3. Those soldiers stationed out in the provinces spend that money on food, wine, whatever, pumping cash right into the local economies. And then, this is the genius part, Step 4. The state demands that all taxes be paid back using those exact same coins. It's a perfect closed loop. It guaranteed that everyone, everywhere, needed and wanted the state's money. But this incredibly powerful system had a fatal flaw hidden inside it. See, that promise from the state that a coin was worth what it said it was worth, that promise was only as strong as the government's self-control. And as the empire's bills for endless wars and massive building projects started to pile up, the temptation to break that promise, well, it became just too much to resist. And this led to something called currency debasement. In simple terms, it was a fiscal magic trick. Let's say you're running low on silver, but you still need to pay the army 1,000,000 coins. What do? You start mixing in cheaper metals, like copper, but you keep the coin's official value exactly the same. All of a sudden, that same pile of silver can make you 1.2 million coins. It was a clever, short-term fix for a huge budget crisis. And the scale of this was just staggering. As you can see on this chart, back under Augustus, the denarius was almost pure silver. Fast forward to Emperor Nero when it's down to about 90%, but then look what happens during the massive crisis of the 3rd century. The silver content just falls off a cliff. It drops to less than 5%. It was basically a bronze coin with a thin silver wash. The state's promise was completely broken. And the consequences of breaking that trust were catastrophic. Because when people suddenly realize the money they're holding is essentially worthless, the entire economy just starts to fall apart. And of course, the state had to come up with a story to explain why all this was happening. So, in his famous edict on maximum prices, did Emperor Diocletian blame his own government's policies? Of course not. Instead, he blamed the boundless avarice, the greed of merchants and shopkeepers. He painted himself as this caring father figure, protecting his people from greedy businesses. It was a classic move, deflect all the blame for a crisis the state itself created. But the reality on the ground was a nightmare. People completely lost faith in the new money. If you had any of the old, pure silver coins, you hoarded them, you didn't spend them. In a lot of places, people just gave up on money altogether and went back to bartering. The unified Roman economy started to crack and fragment. And worst of all, when you pay your soldiers in worthless money, they feel cheated. That leads to low morale, mutinies, and even more political chaos. The very tool that was meant to control the empire was now tearing it apart. Now, there were attempts to fix things. Emperor Constantine, for instance, introduced a new, high-purity gold coin called the solidus, and it was so reliable, so stable, that it actually became the gold standard for international trade for hundreds of years, long after the Western Empire was gone. It was a little glimmer of stability, but for most people using the everyday currency, the damage was already done. So in the end, Rome's invention of state money was a truly monumental achievement. It's what allowed them to pay for, supply, and unify this vast, sprawling empire. But by making the value of money a promise from the government, instead of something real in the metal itself, they created a system that was incredibly vulnerable to the state's own failures. That promise of value was really a promise of trust. And once that trust was broken, the system helped unravel